Thank you. Hello everyone and welcome to The Mill. My name is Adele Sluices and I'm the visual arts curator here, and I've got Oriana Julie with us today for an artist talk.
Hi everybody.
Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the lands of the Kaurna people and pay respect to elders past and present and their continuing relationship with country. I also want to acknowledge Geoff and Sorayya, who are the sponsors of the studio residency that Oriana has just undertaken and that this exhibition is the outcome of. So very great to have you here, guys. No pressure, Oriana. Thanks so much for all of your support. So I am just going to quickly read a little bit of a bio before we get stuck into questions. We'll keep things fairly casual, so if you do need to get up and go to the loo or anything like that, you're welcome to. We have closed the bar now though. Okay. Oriana was the recipient of the Mills Visual Arts Studio Residency, presented with support from donors Geoff Martin and Sorayya Mahmood Martin. She spent 9 months in our studios here at the Mill developing the work for this exhibition. Oriana's visual language is rooted in Afro-surrealism, leveraging imagination to embrace empowering diasporic narratives. Her visual and performance practice speaks about time, identity and culture, as well as personal narratives, creating spaces of sublime escape and personal mythos. Oriana's creative process is deeply connected to the sensory experiences of the body. In 2022, Oriana graduated with a Bachelor of Visual Arts from the Adelaide Central School of Art, where she will undertake honours next year.
This year.
This year.
Yes.
Yeah. It is 2025 now. Over the past few years, she has secured various commissions and residencies, including a Nexus Art Studio residency, a mentorship with Faye Blanche from the Unbound Collective, a nomination for the Don Dunstan Foundation Award, and involvement in Post Office Project Studio residency and performance program. So we're very lucky to have had her. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think
We'll just get stuck into the questions. Cool. So, you said that this exhibition has been informed by your childhood experience of being told that you had your head in the clouds, or those feelings of being off with the fairies. And I think that's something that I know myself, I have experienced that as well, and maybe some of you in the audiences might have been told when you were kids. I wondered if you could speak a little bit about the process of shifting that idea of head in the clouds from its negative connotations that was probably said with when you were a child into this space where we can feel abundance and creative flow and a grounded presence.
okay. Well, I feel that I guess this has been actually kind of like an ongoing process, and I guess having the space here gave me the foundation and grounding that I really needed to allow myself to unpack this. Because it has been, I guess, something that, and I guess people that do resonate with this, it can be a very tricky and pivotal thing to work through, especially when it does come with those negative connotations. And I guess being a woman and also a person of colour, and I needed to kind of find a way to rewrite these kind of personal narratives which came through, I guess, working with this. I kind of forgot what the question was.
So how you've shifted that into the abundance that you have in this exhibition.
Okay, alright, so I guess I managed to do that by just giving myself full permission to explore the kind of depths of my imagination and just allow myself to explore what was there and to, I guess, create from that kind of sensory feeling. So that just was, if I wanted to paint, I would paint. If I wanted to then move on to something tactile like the beading, I would allow myself to bead. So essentially, yeah, just kind of going from here to there to there to there and seeing what would occur. And some of the stuff was terrible, but that was beautiful in its own way because it's a part of the project. Even though maybe I didn't like that aesthetic value, it still had, it was a part of that process that brought it together.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have some works that literally translate. There's works with clouds in them, but other works that do have this element that's more about creative flow and that sort of thing as well. So process is about that translation too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. My next question relates to the essay that Jana Leigh's written about the exhibition as well, which you can find some printed copies over there. It's also linked as a PDF download from our website. So in your essay, Jana, you reference Afro-Surrealist movement and the method of recording the visuals of the half-dreaming state as intended to observe the subconscious before the conscious could alter it. I wondered how much you've employed these sorts of processes in your exhibition and how the methods and legacy of Afro-Surrealism influence your work.
Okay. I guess first of all, I just wanted to thank Jana for her amazing essay. Jana and I have, I guess, got to go through art school together, so we've had a good kind of cross-pollination of ideas and but just to kind of, reground me.
Okay, so
that last bit.
The bit, the Afro-Surrealists using their method of recording visuals from the half-dreaming state, intended to observe the subconscious before the conscious could alter it, and how you might have used that legacy or been influenced by that.
Okay, so that reminds me to a particular kind of quote that comes in the Afro-Surrealist Manifesto, which is the Afro-Surreal is in this kind of space of the past present, which occurs, I guess, in the right now. So again, I guess it kind of comes back into allowing oneself to be led by those immediate feelings and responding to them before, I guess, the conscious mind kind of comes in with its own ideas, wanting to kind of alter the things. And I guess that even comes through in, even though I might have an idea or a vision of what something might look like, there comes a point in any of the artworks where I feel that they cease to belong to me and they take on their own kind of energy and identity, and I become led by them. You know, and that can sometimes take time, and you know, and there's that tension there as well, because sometimes the conscious mind wants to be like, no, but I want you to be this, you know, and it's interesting in the ways that the elements will like misbehave, in a way, kind of assert their own authority to be like, no, I don't want to do this. We're going to go this way, and I found that every time I trust that process, you know, it never leads me astray. It's when that kind of resistance starts to build up. So I guess in reference to that question and that past, future, now.
Do you think there are any particular works in the exhibition that have come more from the subconscious than others, or do you think that it's more across the board with your process?
I feel in particular it would be the beadwork, so the tactile elements, but also this cloud piece here. There was something about these ones, and I think because they're a bit more kind of like abstract, I can just allow myself to kind of flow, zone out, think multiple thoughts. I guess, and I guess with the beadwork again, you're just almost enter into like a meditative state, and then that just, you know, takes you on all these, well, for me it's kind of like a deep philosophical journey, and you know, I think about human experiences, and I guess the beads, and the bead is kind of like almost like symbolic as an individual, and what does one bead look like on its own, let alone when you put them together, and then all the many different ways that could manifest, but yet it kind of happens like this.
Really. So that really leads into this next question, which was spending a bit of time talking about the materiality within the exhibition. So you've used oil paint, the beads, resins, feathers, the repurposed furniture, but other domestic items as well, to create what you call immersive environments that translate embodied sensations into material expression. So this is a two-parter, so I'll ask you I'll ask you the first one first. It would be great to hear about what draws you to the items, but then about how you've used them to form these affective bonds, I guess, creating sensation within the material.
Okay. I guess what initially draws me to the items, and I feel like this is, you know, yeah, where Afro-Surrealism really comes into it, because it does talk about the kind of mystical and the kind of, and magic as well. So there are particular items that have a, what could be described as an aura, an energy. There's something about them that feels alive, and it doesn't happen with all objects, but with this kind of multi-dimensional view, I can just look at something and be like, oh, that's this thing, or this will be a cat, or this will be a chimera, or yeah, like you know, for the couch, because this is a continuous work in progress. I thought that I could bead the whole thing in 3 months, but yeah, no, that's I think a good year, possibly year and a half project. But I saw this and I'm like, oh, this is a kind of tiger-esque couch, and eventually it will have claw feet, ceramic claw feet, and I will find a way to make it also light up too. But yeah, so I guess, yeah, these objects just have a spark, and it's like there's more to them than meets the eye, and I guess a part of my interaction and process is uncovering what lies beneath, and then bringing that to the surface to share with the audience.
This is like slightly divergent from what I've written in here, but at the beginning of your studio residency, we talked quite a lot about food.
Yes.
And that's a project for another time. I think that we went other directions with this exhibition, but what we do have in this exhibition are these beautiful plates that are filled with this abundant fruit, and I guess I wanted to maybe you can just touch on the plate and the offering, I guess, that you make with the plate. Like, what is it about a bowl or a plate that that draws you in and has that sensation that makes you want to?
Yeah, so I guess, I feel like that's always like a two-part kind of response. So the plates, I'm really drawn to like the vintage, antique, particularly plates that are, I guess, Italian, and a part of that does speak to my, I guess, African American and also Italian ancestry. My mum is Italian. I grew up with all my Northern European family. You know, they're from Trieste, so like from the north. So bit of a segue, but essentially, you know, a lot of these items were a part of, I guess, memory, and you know, they're nostalgic. The fruit in particular, I really have gravitated towards pomegranates, you know, and that again is kind of imbued in childhood memory of walking in McGill when there was a place called the Gums, and there was this beautiful pomegranate tree that just grew naturally there, and you know, we would go and we would get it, and you know, that was something that was a part of I guess that routine, but I guess on the deeper level with like fruit, I don't know, there's something about fruit, it's so lush and bodily, and again with pomegranate, you know, when you eat them, you get the, you know, when you rip them apart, there's all the, I don't know, the juices, so it is a fully immersive and tactile experience, and you know, there's all the sensory components where there's like touch, scent, taste, and kind of all of those things make up this experience.
My next question is about fruit.
Okay.
So I think you've covered some of it, but let's go a little bit deeper if we can. So in the large painting in the foyer of Carly, and then in the smaller paintings that we have over here, and also the sculptural objects that you've just spoken about, and then in the workshop that you're going to be doing in March, we see the fruit depicted, and for me, I can see the fruit is a symbol of abundance, of delight and enjoyment, and what you just said about that sensory experience of it as well, and it's also a little bit sexy. Can you talk a little bit more about, like, what does the fruit mean? What are the things that you're trying to bring into the exhibition with the fruit?
Okay, so I feel with the fruit, again, kind of speaking back to family, but like on both my Italian side, which is my mum's side, and then the African American ancestry. So with the fruit, and this also kind of goes into like the cake as well, and just sweets. It's kind of, you know, so I guess my ancestors were a part of the transatlantic slave movement, and you know, my family originated, I guess, the past few generations from Mississippi. So it almost kind of feels like there's this, on one level, like an ancestral healing, that by allowing myself to experience pleasure and abundance from, you know, relatively simple things, because you know it's fruit. It feels like it could be excess, but I guess in reality it's not. Saying that well, if that makes sense. Yeah, so there's this rewriting of the narrative that's happening, and kind of through me I'm able to connect with my ancestry and ancestors and rewrite that space. And also by, I guess, when I grew up being a young person, I didn't feel like there were a lot of, like, I didn't see that anywhere for myself. So a part of that is, you know, so young people of colour, it doesn't even have to be people of colour, but you know, anybody can access that, and you know, I guess see, yeah, that kind of happening. Just, yeah.
I think that there's this beautiful thing that happens in the exhibition where it does feel almost like like an offering of that abundance as well. That there's an abundance here, that there's enough to share as well. That it's not something that you're hoarding for yourself. It's a sharing moment too. Yeah. Yeah. Please.
No, absolutely. I think that's actually a really important thing to, or one of the important things to, you know, I guess brush upon when there's abundance. And I think Oriana might have put it in her essay really well. I'm trying to think of where it was, but it's like, you know, yeah, it's, if I, for example, think of, well, this is my abundance, but it's not just there solely for me. Like, you know, but it's also having that kind of autonomy to choose who you share it with, and because I think that's also something that is important as well, you know, in terms of, you know, like boundaries, but also I guess it's more about having multiple people working towards a common goal.
And then the croquembouche down the end, and I know you mentioned this in the essay as well, that it feels like this moment of celebration which bookends it against the moment of celebrating Carly in the foyer too. There's this nice sort of balance between those moments of celebration. Yeah. More croquembouche painting.
More Additionally, I do also have a background as a pastry chef,
Cool.
which I did for 7 or 8 years. So I guess that also kind of comes, you know, into that too, and you know, finding those intersections between art and food. And you know, I think at one point the exhibition was, I did kind of imagine or hope it could just be food. It's just like, what if I could just make all these foods?
And we had chatted about, instead of doing like a group workshop, it was going to be like one-on-one, sit down and have a croissant.
Yeah.
And have a chat, which would have been really lovely. That's an idea for the future.
Future projects.
Yeah.
But I am excited for the beading workshop, because I guess a part of sharing knowledge is, you know, with this, I want to show the exact processes of how I make this and share that with the world, because I feel that that is a beautiful thing to do. And I feel like there's a lot of, what is that word, like safeguarding or hoarding knowledge, especially when that comes from fear that it might be stolen or replicated. But I also feel very passionate that no one is going to make that like me, just like everyone will have their own individual way of finding that expression, even if it's through the same medium. Much like when I invite people to come and bead, and I think particularly on that one, I can see exactly where other people have beaded and recognise those patterns, because they look different from the ones that I would organically make.
Yeah, I think collaboration can be this wonderful opportunity to see different ways that people do things. And I mean, as someone who has facilitated a lot of workshops over the years, it's always wonderful to see this group of 10 people learning a new skill or exploring a new skill, and there'll always be one person that wants to make like 5 things, and one person who like very diligently works on their one thing, and that the breadth of creative expression is so wonderful, isn't it? So yeah, there are still tickets available for Oriana's workshop if anyone is interested in attending. My last question is about the chimeras. Chimeras. Yeah, is that how you pronounce it? I went to public school, so they didn't teach you words like that. And the role of the fantastical and the mythological within your work. And in particular, I think that you mentioned a couple of times in your artist statement about the personal mythos, which I think is, you know, there's a mythological that some people who maybe didn't go to public school might have learnt about at school, and, you know, the Greek and the Roman myths and that sort of thing. But having your own personal mythos and creating something that is true and meaningful for you is an important part of this exhibition. I wondered if you could speak particularly to works. So the lady with the flower head, and then the bird with the breasts.
Okay. Okay, so I guess those works both kind of, well, I guess first off to start, I consider them to be chimeras. I guess if we're looking at that, the Greco-Roman chimera, which I think had 3 different.
What's a chimera? I went to public school
You
as
went to
well.
public school.
Okay.
Did you describe it in your? Oh, you can.
Okay, Yana, do you want to
Sure.
take a step in?
So, I've come across a few different descriptions of the chimera, but the main one seems to be head and 4 quarters of a lion, body of a goat, but also with the goat's head sort of sticking out of there, and then the tail is a serpent. So the end of the tail is the serpent's head, just sort of snapping away. But the first chimera that I actually came across was a 3-headed thing. I forget what exactly that, I think it may have been lion, dragon, and something weird like rooster or something. But the point is, it's several animals smushed together in a way that doesn't quite make sense, and is kind of monstrous. And it was an interesting thing, because doing my research to write Oriana's essay, I learned that the chimera was very specifically a female monster. And I don't know, did you know about this, Oriana?
No, I didn't know the specifics until we,
Yeah, well, I think it was a lovely coincidence then. But yes, the term chimera, I think, has been, well, it has evolved a bit to mean anything really that's been sutured together.
So it's a hybrid.
Yeah, it's well, I don't know. I mean, a hybrid is a thing that happens from crossbreeding, whereas a chimera is more like a Frankenstein's monster, I think.
I do know, and I'm going to probably chop this, so if anyone is a medical student or feel free to step in, but I do know there's also chimerism that happens in a genetic sense, where you know, you would find like a woman, for example, would give birth to a child and then find that they have no like genetic or very minimal genetic connection to that child, and that's happened because there's been absorption of another twin in the womb, and they've absorbed and taken on their kind of genetic code. And there was, I feel like you're just.
So that's new information for me, but because I'd heard of chimerism in the context of pregnancy myself. And with that one, I heard that any woman who has ever been pregnant will still carry a little bit of the genetic code of the child she carried. But I haven't actually checked that one. I haven't fact-checked it. I don't know if it's true. But
So many different versions of I guess chimeras, and I suppose in the contemporary context we're making up our own kind of you know, I suppose that could be applied, what's that word, psychologically.
We could stick with smush.
Smoosh them together. And I guess that's kind
it's a good umbrella term.
And I feel like in a way that's kind of what's happening here, and I guess with the, actually, okay, that's a good way to kind of go into the flower head or rose head woman and the bird. So that started with kind of like collage work and looking at erotic material and then splicing that and then putting it with something else, then kind of finding that in those, I guess, printouts, it didn't have enough depth to it, so then I would kind of try and augment my own body to try and get the shadows. So there's this kind of splicing of multiple things to kind of that come into play. So yeah, they come from multiple sources.
And the bird with the tits.
Yeah.
Pretty bird.
Yeah, I think the bird is probably one of my favourite paintings. It's got my eye, and I like the idea of it just like how the eye would just take up the whole entire head. It would be the beak and the head, and I was just like, hey, that's missing something. That bird needs some tits. Or some breasts. And because I have access to my own body, so it's kind of just like, okay, well, I will use my own body, and now it has the breasts. And yeah, I think it's like a bit of a harpy, actually. Like a happy one.
Yeah, it's very free, I think. The way that she's flying, and no one can bring her down.
That's nice. I like that.
In the abundance of all that fruit on the wall as well. Yeah, you guys can go over and have a look after we finish. Yeah.
I do feel like, actually no, I feel like this is important to add. I feel like it's also important for me to use my body, because also body dysmorphia has been a very prominent part of my life, and something that I still continue with, and actually get extreme anxiety when I have to look at photos of myself or see myself. So, so putting that, I guess, into seeing my body as art or a reference for art is also a really beautiful way to help rewrite and, solidify myself, and also that I'm more than a body too. And so this kind of
being able to center yourself in that. Not, I guess, in a way, those works it's de-identified as well. Like, we wouldn't know that it's necessarily your body. Those are parts, and other parts of those bodies are flowers or a bird. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's the end of my questions, but we have a bit of time to open it up to the audience. So does anybody have any questions?
It's a coincidence. I actually had that on my phone the other day because I'm interested in that about the carrying genes.
Yeah.
So I came
Micro
across
chimeras.
I came across
Was
that
it micro
article,
chimeras?
like a couple of weeks ago.
Shall I-
A snapshot of it. 'Cause
That thing that we were talking about women picking up these bits of DNA. It's funny because as the conversation continued, I was actually thinking about anglerfish.
Oh yes.
So
Oh, okay, yeah, no, I know what you're talking about.
you know what I'm talking about. So for those who are unfamiliar, female anglerfish essentially absorb the males that mate with them, and just sort of carry these different sets of DNA to use at their leisure. Did I have that right? That's
Yeah, that's essentially because being at the bottom of the sea, it was so rare to come across a potential mate that they would literally fuse, and their bloodstreams would eventually cross over, and the male would lose his eyesight completely, and then they would share. Yeah, there would be that kind of symbiosis. So,
Yes, and the male anglerfish is diminutive compared to the female.
But I guess that's a kind of good, another thing that I wanted to say with the chimeras is for me, I consider these to be beautiful, but in a way, I think they could also be seen as monstrous or unsettling, depending on, I guess, context and, all the many things that make a person unique, cultural upbringing, for example. When something, I think these chairs, this one has such a great appeal to that, when something is not being used in the intended way or in its traditional way, and that's flipped, that can be a very destabilizing and scary thing. Change can be terrifying. So I think that element kind of, there's that unambiguous terror that kind of comes through in them.
You talked about feeling vulnerable about showing your artwork and presenting it. So how does having your own solo exhibition feel?
Actually, it felt really nice.
Oh, good.
And I feel like, because this has been a very long process. I think it's been, 9 years of, kind of chugging along. And I think I've kind of now arrived really at a space where I feel ready to really share these kind of vulnerable spaces. And that has felt, that's actually felt really nice. Yeah, of course there's, a little bit of anxiety and nervousness and, such as like, public speaking as well, that can always be a bit,
You're doing great. And the response to the exhibition has been fantastic. People have been saying how mesmerising the video work is, with the beads as well, and enjoying how like lush things are as they're walking through the space.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Any questions from over here?
I find the Chimera interesting. They were the oldest record of Chimera were guarding the gates of Hades in Greek mythology, and they were absolutely a monster. And they were the three-headed one you described, and they were the monster, the guard of the gates of hell.
Was that with the dog?
Oh,
Cerberus.
so
Was it? Or is this?
well, the funny thing about Greek mythology is that it evolved in its own right. So
Yeah.
it's interesting to hear this version of the chimera. Did it predate the dog Cerberus?
I think so, yes. Yeah.
How fun.
Any questions from over here?
Just as a comment, I actually see a lot of confidence like blossoming. There's this, I'm not familiar with your work, so it's really beautiful, but I see around me there's this confidence. It's, I am strong. I applaud that. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that's like beautiful. I hope that, It's like, I'll take it. It's like, I am confident. Sorry, I keep coming back to chimeras and then like all the things that was just like I should have said this in the question. So
Go
apparently
again if you
I've got the question.
You've got the question.
I've got the
You've
questions.
got the question.
Answers the questions, which is like the really obvious one of why I like chimeras. Is because like I feel like a hybrid chimera. I feel like that was like the whole kind of foundation of that. I was born in Australia. My dad's African American. My mum's Italian. He came here as part of the US military, and we lived in Woomera. So the first part of my life was harsh climate, like red sand, hot weather, the giant burning slide. Always remember that one. And then after we moved when I was 8 into back to Adelaide, I spent a lot of time with my family, and they had a cherry orchard up at Ashford. So until I was probably about 16, actually no, it'd be later, like 19. I spent all my summers, and whenever I could get up there, picking fruit, eating fruit, eating fruit, made friends with the cherry tree. It sounds really bizarre, but actually there was this beautiful old tree that sat in the middle of the orchard, and this thing was massive and dark blackened branches, and it had the gnarliest, smallest but like sweetest cherries. And I don't know, I would sit there and kind of, there was a language with this tree, and it felt very much alive, and it was my friend. It was a beautiful moment. So I guess again, fruit.
Yeah. The life of inanimate objects, I guess, for lack of a better word for a tree. Non-human people.
Yeah. And I guess of them with the found objects, because my life when I was actually probably until about a good 3-4 years ago is when I came into a good place of stability. But you know, in terms of like class, it's gone from being, you know, middle class to lower class to kind of higher middle class to homelessness and poverty. So it's been this kind of like here, you know, all over the spot. And I remember that intense time of not having enough and in order to sustain myself. You know, and my family, you know, it would be creativity really went into, oh, look at this thing, I will take it and I will repurpose it and make it beautiful. So some of the objects too are actually objects that I've lived with, sometimes for years, sometimes they're briefly in the house, and then sometimes, you know, they go out into the world, sometimes they come back to the house, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes they get sold off as, you know, and they find a kind of final form, but it seems like there's this continuous shifting that happens.
Yeah, I think that boundary between an artwork and a domestic object is really interesting, and I think because artists spend so much time with the objects that they're working on, it does become very blurred. Like the relationship to the body is important, and that happens through the act of making. Yeah. And so nice to be able to sit here.
Yes, it's, if you do have a chance, come and sit. And
Everyone can have a turn
Yeah.
sitting on the couch.
I feel like this is like a really good kind of space to kind of just, there's a nice feeling when you rub your palm over here, so yeah. Good.
Chloe and I did joke about whether we get you to lay on the couch for the talk and that I'd sit over there to ask the questions. But no, I think this worked out well.
Does that make the artist the therapist?
Or maybe the other way around. I could lay on the couch, you could therapize me. No, I have to pay you much more money for that. Probably. Anyway, we might wrap it up, seeming as I'm really derailing